Okay. So arguing against a man who's been at the nitty-gritty heart of the energy debate, the climate change debate for years. In 2000, he discovered that soot was probably the second leading cause of global warming after CO2. His team have been making detailed calculations of the relative impacts of different energy sources. His first time at TED, possibly a disadvantage, we shall see. From Stanford, Professor Mark Jacobson. Good luck.
Thank you. Okay. So my premise here is that nuclear energy puts out more carbon dioxide, puts out more air pollutants, enhances mortality more, and takes longer to put up than real renewable energy systems, namely wind, solar, geothermal power, hydro, tidal, wave power. And it also enhances nuclear weapons proliferation. So let's start by just looking at the CO2 emissions from the life cycle. CO2e emissions are equivalent emissions of all the greenhouse gases and particles that cause warming and converted to CO2. And if you look, wind and concentrated solar have the lowest CO2 emissions. If you look at the graph, nuclear, there are two bars here. One is a low estimate and one is a high estimate. The low estimate is the nuclear energy industry estimate of nuclear. The high is the average of 103 scientific peer-reviewed studies. And this is just the CO2 from the life cycle. If we look at the delays, it takes between 10 and 19 years to put up a nuclear power plant from planning to operation. This includes about 3.5 to 6 years for a site permit, and another 2.5 to 4 years for a construction permit and issue, and then 4 to 9 years for actual construction. And in China, right now they're putting up 5 gigawatts of nuclear, and it's the average just for the construction time of these is 7.1 years, on top of the planning times. While you're waiting around for your nuclear, you have to run the regular electric power grid, which is mostly coal in the United States and around the world. And the chart here shows the difference between the emissions from the regular grid, resulting if you use nuclear or anything else, versus wind, CSP, or photovoltaics. Wind takes about 2 to 5 years on average, same as concentrated solar and photovoltaic. So the difference is the opportunity cost of using nuclear versus wind or something else. So if you add these two together alone, you can see a separation that nuclear puts out at least 9 to 17 times more CO2 equivalent emissions than wind energy. And this doesn't even account for the footprint on the ground. If you look at the air pollution health effects, this is the number of deaths per year in 2020 just from vehicle exhaust. Let's say we converted all the vehicles in the United States to battery electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, or flex fuel vehicles run on E85. Or right now in the United States, 50 to 100,000 people die per year from air pollution, and vehicles are about 25,000 of those. In 2020, the number will go down to 15,000 due to improvements. And so on the right, you see gasoline emissions, the death rates in 2020. If you go to corn or cellulosic ethanol, you'd actually increase the death rate slightly. If you go to nuclear, you do get a big reduction, but it's not as much as with wind or concentrated solar. Now, if you consider the fact that nuclear weapons proliferation is associated with nuclear energy proliferation, and because we know, for example, India and Pakistan developed nuclear weapons secretly by enriching uranium in nuclear energy facilities. North Korea did that to some extent. Iran is doing that right now, and Venezuela would be doing it if they started with their nuclear energy facilities. If you consider just in the next 30 years, if you did a large-scale expansion of nuclear energy across the world, and as a result, there was just one nuclear bomb created that was used to destroy a city, such as Mumbai or some other big city, mega city, the additional death rates due to this averaged over 30 years and then scaled to the population of the US would be this. So do we need this? The next thing is, what about the footprint? Stuart mentioned the footprint. Actually, the footprint on the ground for wind is by far the smallest of any energy source in the world. Because the footprint, as you can see, is just the pole touching the ground. And you can power the entire US vehicle fleet with 73,000 to 145,000 5-megawatt wind turbines. That would take between 1 and 3 square kilometers of footprint on the ground entirely. The spacing is something else. That's the footprint that is always being confused. People confuse footprint with spacing. As you can see from these pictures, the spacing between can be used for multiple purposes, including agricultural land, rangeland, or open space. Over the ocean, it's not even land. Now, if we look at nuclear, what do we... with nuclear, what do we have? We have facilities around there. You also have a buffer zone that's 17 square kilometers, and you have these uranium mining that you have to deal with. Now, if we go to the area, a lot is worse than nuclear or wind. For example, cellulosic ethanol, to power the entire US vehicle fleet, this is how much land you would need. That's cellulosic, second generation biofuels from prairie grass. Here's corn ethanol. It's smaller. This is based on ranges from data. But if you look at nuclear, it would be the size of Rhode Island to power the US vehicle fleet. For wind, there's a larger area, but much smaller footprint. And of course, with wind, you could put it all over the East Coast, offshore, theoretically, or you can split it up. And now, if you go back to looking at geothermal, it's even smaller than both, and solar is slightly larger than the nuclear spacing, but it's still pretty small. And this is to power the entire US vehicle fleet. To power the entire world with 50% wind, you would need about 1% of world land. Matching, the reliability. Baseload is actually irrelevant. We want to match the hour-by-hour power supply. You can do that by combining renewables. This is from real data in California, looking at wind data and solar data, and it considers just using existing hydro to match the hour-by-hour power demand. Here are the world wind resources. There are 5 to 10 times more wind available worldwide than we need for all the world. So then here's the final ranking, and one last slide I just want to show. This is the choice. You can either have wind or nuclear. If you use wind, you guarantee ice will last. Nuclear, the time lag alone will allow the Arctic to melt and other places to melt more, and we can guarantee a clean blue sky or an uncertain future with nuclear power.
Come, Stuart. Come. No, stay here. All right.